1, 2, 3, swing it.
Oh, what's going on here? Sorry, coming. Coming.
There we go. 1, 2, 3, swing it.
Do you have an old sound tape or your favorite cassette tape that you want converted to CD or MP3 format? Do you need a demo CD, radio ad, a DJ or even a sound system for your wedding, birthday or special occasion? Then why not get in contact with KTR Records on 07931 152 448 or check out our website on www.ktrrecords.com. We have been in business since 2004 and also undertake community projects. So for your remixes, dubplates and all your sound editing needs, why not contact KTR Records, official sponsor of World Jam Global Radio. KTR Records, coming your way.
I was terrified about sharing the vulnerabilities of people with difficulties reading and spelling words. However, I could see the value in sharing, and I have taken the time to make some notes about this in my book, Dyslexic: The Silent Difference. You can get your copy now at www.a1tribe.com or amazon.com or amazon.co.uk. Thank you again, everyone, for your support.
Do you like music like this?
Great music all the time.
Or like this?
The music you love.
Maybe this.
Great music that makes you want to turn up the volume loud.
Or life track like this.
Especially where human life is concerned. Surely, sooner or later, people will realize that lives actually matter.
Then you're in the right place. Keep it locked to World Jam Global, where music is harmony.
Music 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Yeah, you're a World Jam. Hotter than them.
See live schedule.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Stand by for another exhilarating interview and discussion on issues today. World Jam Global Radio. Welcome, wherever you might be, wherever you are tuning in from. My name is Kervin Julian. It's Issues Today, live on World Jam Global Radio.
I paid for my crime.
Please excuse me while I stream live across the globe.
Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival. It was do or die. I had too many rivals. I was too young and foolish to stay in school. I learned my lessons in the streets. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand.
We are following up on the Kristine Bunch
Spend it all in jail.
wrongful conviction story.
With this living hell. Already dead.
And she will be supported by another roundtable recruitee, Stephanie Babb.
Getting my time. I paid.
And we'll be introducing them very shortly.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters.
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison. Prison.
Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime. Already did my time, I paid for my crime.
You'll never believe the lengths that they go to actually stop us sharing our live stream in certain places.
Me off my back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already.
Won't be much longer now, folks.
I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent, I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters. Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time.
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison. Prison. Prison.
Wow. Trying to cope with this living hell. Trying to cope with this living hell.
Well, you're joining Issues today for another informative discussions with our two guest speakers, Kristine Bunch and Stephanie Babb. Kristine spent 17 years in prison for a crime that was not a crime, having lost her child in an accidental fire the police chose to assume was arson, and arrested her within 7 days, being sentenced while carrying her unborn child, giving birth whilst in prison, with her 17-year-old brother having to step up and raise her son, then on release, championing the rights of the wrongfully convicted. While Stephanie was given the shocking news that her brother, a war veteran, a captain in his country's army, was shot dead by police in suspicious circumstances, with evidence suggesting a huge cover-up, witnesses that gave a different account than what the police did, and even their own findings contradicting the false claims made by on-the-scene detectives, then having to shoulder the responsibility of fighting for the truth and realizing that families are not represented by the mistakes of the systems. She went on to fight for the rights of those families. Today, Bunch and Babb, the newest recruits of the Roundtable team, come together to discuss where do we go from here. We're going to be right back in just a few moments.
Who was out sin? Let him cast the first stone. I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen.
Big shouts to Yolanda McNair, Vanessa, D. Martin, Patrick Lane, Scott Russian, Jerry Summers, Jonathan Newton, and all the rest of the Roundtable team.
Yeah.
Big shout out going out to our beloved TJ, who's not feeling too well today. She was due to be with us, but she woke up feeling absolutely terrible. So she's going to be taking a side bench today. Stand by any moment now. So, last week on the round table, we actually finished up with talking to Stephanie Babb as she talked through how how families were affected, or shall I say, how they were badly impacted by the lack of support, and how they're not even treated as victims, the forgotten, the hidden victims in all of this injustice. And I think that was a real battle cry. Then I think it touched many hearts, as Stephanie shared that last week. But this particular show today, it's meant to be the part 2 of the Kristine Bunch story. And it's one that shook me. Shocked me is an understatement. It shook me to the very core. And I remember, in fact, I'm not going to go over the story because I'm going to allow Kristine to do that very shortly. But just to in a quick wrap up, as I said in the intro, an accidental fire in the home, which cost the life of her 3-year-old child, and even while at the hospital, if I remember correctly, she was approached by the officer who was obviously one of the first on the scene, who was convinced that it was arson, and convinced that the person that did it must have been known to the family, and within 5 days, Kristine was arrested. And charged with the murder of her 3-year-old child. And I think one of the most shocking statements that I heard was at sentencing, the judge said that they had no sympathy for her because they felt that she got pregnant on purpose in order to try and get some sort of an easy sentence for this crime that they've convinced themselves that she committed. But I'm going to allow Kristine to tell you how that story unfolded and how the truth managed to reveal itself, and how when you cannot begin to imagine a parent losing a child in a fire, only to have them have to suspend their grief while they try to fight for their freedom. And I'm not sure suspending the grief was what Kristine did, and I'm not even sure how possible that could be. And I'll allow her to tell that story. But I would have imagined if she'd have allowed that to get on top of her, Kristine may very well not have been here today. What a traumatic experience. Many people have ended up in a more fatal position or circumstance for far less. I cannot begin to imagine what it would be like going through a prison sentence, convicted of murdering your child when you know you didn't. And it took 14 years for them to find out that it was an accident. And I believe that the fire started, it was an electrical fire that started in the ceiling of the home, which then spread to the house. And another almost 3 years before she was eventually released and set free. But we're going to be talking to Kristine very shortly. But first, let me introduce our support guest. And she's no support act. Let me tell you, she's a mainstayer, she's an upfront runner, and she is a formidable campaigner for the rights of those who are going through mental health related miscarriages of justice, where they have lost their loved ones in the battle against police brutality. Her beloved brother, Captain Brian Babb, whose life was so fatefully taken by the hands and the gunpower of police. She's been campaigning ever since. It's none other than Stephanie Babb. How are we doing, Stephanie?
Good morning, Kervin. I'm doing well.
Well, it's
and
more.
again, thank you for providing this show.
It's
for everybody.
morning, but it's evening here for me in the UK.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
I know.
It's gone 6 p.m. But hey, it's great to have you here again. We're going to be talking to Kristine very shortly. But just remind our audience just a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what you do, and why you're here today.
Gotcha. I'm in Eugene, Oregon, and in 2015, my brother was a retired captain from the Army, and he was on 100% disability for PTSD and TBI. He was on the phone with his VA therapist, and the therapist called the police to do a well check. And they showed up, and because he was a veteran, they brought in a SWAT team, put snipers on his neighbor's roof, and when he came to the door, he repeatedly came to the door and told him to get off the property. And the fourth time he came to the door, he was shot dead, standing in his own doorway. And there were pictures of a gun sitting next to him. And admittedly, the police had put it there to take pictures of, or to take evidence photos. It just doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. And we have been able to prove, and will do so furthermore in court on February 18th, as we're suing the Eugene Police Department. And we're going to find out where this goes, and hopefully the truth will be presented. So yeah, that's what I've been doing the last few years, is fighting for the rights of families that have been subjected to this entity that is so powerful and has ruined a lot of lives.
Yeah,
as Kristine knows.
At the end of the roundtable show last week, you kind of round up with the fact that the impact that this has on families, and the fact that families are not treated like victims. And we're going to be looking a lot more into that as we look at the feature of where do we go from here once we've spoken to Kristine. But Stephanie, once again, let me just, A, thank you for being here today. B, thank you for being part of our roundtable team and sharing your story and your expertise with us. And let me just say, it's an absolute honor and a privilege to have you fully inducted into the family of Issues Today, World Jam Global Radio, and the roundtable team. And let me just say this, you won't be going anywhere for the foreseeable future, because we have a real work to do. We do. So,
thank you.
Welcome.
Kervin. I truly appreciate that.
Okay. And I think the audience loves you. What you bring to the table is so much passion, conviction, commitment, and a real reality check sometimes. So
yeah, I do get a little emotional sometimes. So I'll apologize.
And hey, let me just say this: there are several stories that I've listened to that have brought tears to my eyes, and I've welled up, and I've had to try and compose myself.
It's hard.
Yeah, and I'm not the victim or family victim member, so.
It's almost harder listening to somebody else's story because I feel so powerless.
Yeah, and I get that.
That's why Kristine, I'm just thrown off by her whole story, and I can't wait to listen to the rest of it.
And that's the thing. I get that, because sometimes I'm listening to somebody's story and I just wish I could do something else. I wish I could do more. I wish there was something that I could do to change this situation right here and now. And
but that's what we're doing. That's why we have the show, is the more people that know and understand. And not only that, is we're able to reach the families that have not been able to have a voice, and that they can hear that they're not alone, because that isolation is what they rely on to keep power.
Yeah. And just so you know, Patrick Lane says, we love Stephanie. Vanessa Whirling says, we all get emotional, sweetheart. Latara Smith says, amen. We do love Latara Smith.
Thank you guys.
I don't know if many of you have heard of Latara Smith, but Latara Smith is also a massive campaigner for wrongful convictions, a private investigator also, which I've featured on this show on many occasions. So maybe she's also somebody that you guys want to get in touch with.
It's fantastic.
I've not spoken to Latara for a while, but it would be great to have her back on the show again soon. And no doubt we'll talk to her about some of the updates on some of the cases that she's been involved with, that she's actually seen come to pass, and people that have been exonerated through some of the work that she's also been involved with. So maybe that's something else that Kristine Bunch, you can maybe hook up with Latara as well, because she's a great ally and a good asset. Okay, so we're a good family. Right, so thank you very much for that, Stephanie. And we're going to be coming back to you in a short while. But then we want to introduce our lead guest, because I don't want to say our main guest, because they're both main guests and they've both got a lot to offer today. But as I said in the beginning, 17 years she spent in prison for a crime that was not a crime. While she was grieving, and she had she was sentenced while carrying an unborn child, had her child while she was in prison, had it wrestled from her, and the real honourable thing in this, which doesn't get to be mentioned, and where Stephanie was talking about the impact on families, is her younger 17-year-old brother had to give up his prospects and potential and step up and play dad and raise her son while she continued to go through her sentence. And that would be a tremendous honour. We take our hat off to that young man, and if there was something that we could do to honour him in any other way, we would. But right here and now on Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio, as part of this show, we honour him for what he did. He must have believed in Kristine, and whether he did or not is irrespective. He stepped up to the plate and became the man that her son needed in his life until she was able to be released from prison and come out and be the mother that he also needed. So we honour him, and I really feel that it's important that we honour him because he's a very integral part of this story, especially for Kristine, and a support network for her also, because I don't think she would have been able to go through that sentence if she didn't have somebody who was able to step in and look after her son. So, without any further ado, to introduce herself and tell you who she is, where she's from, and what she's all about, let's introduce Kristine Bunch. How are we doing, Kristine?
I'm good, Curtin. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Once again, I am honored to be here. My name is Kristine Bunch. I am from Indiana. I lost 17 years of my life for a wrongful conviction that involved the death of my son and an accidental fire that had been mislabeled an arson. I gave birth to my second child in prison, and my brother stepped up to the plate immediately. He believed in me. He fought for me. He took care of my son. He worked 3 jobs instead of going to school to make sure that I was taken care of. And when I got out, he was still right in my corner, because it's a huge adjustment after 17 years. And I mean, I can't say enough about him. He understands when I just melt down and can't really function, and he's there for me. He's supported me while I started a non-for-profit to help other exonerees that have been through this. And he continues to support me as I go speak for legislative issues and the Innocence Project and whatever we can do to raise awareness and hopefully stop wrongful convictions from happening.
Wow. Well, today we've really honoured him today. And I hope that he hears this, he gets to hear it, and he actually gets the message sent on to him. I'm not sure, maybe somebody can send us a message if they like. We appear to be having problems streaming, and it looks more like the program is freezing, but I don't know if you are hearing us and we are still live. Please just let us know, because that would be very helpful. Yeah, as far as I can see, all my recordings are showing me that we're still running, but I'm not sure what's going on here, but no doubt somebody will tell us. If you can't hear us, please let us know. And okay, yeah, we've got confirmation. They're hearing us loud and clear, but the program is freezing, so not to worry. That's something that I've got to sort out my end. We've had a technical problem over the last few days that we've been trying to resolve, but as long as you can hear us, that's all that matters. But let's just go back to that fateful day, Kristine. because there was a fire in the house. Tell us what happened again, as briefly as you can, before we move on into the where do we go from here.
I mean, I woke up, and at first you don't realize that your home is on fire. It's hard to wake up to that and immediately come alert and say, oh my God, this is what's going on. And I remember thinking it's foggy, which made no sense, but the house was filled with smoke. And I went to get my son out of his bedroom, and I couldn't get through there because there was fire in the doorway. I ran out the front door, and I busted out his window with a tricycle, and I started to climb through. And by this time, the neighbors had been alerted by my screams, and they pulled me out of the window and told me that I needed to wait for the fire department because the flames were going through the roof.
So let's just stop there for a second. So your child is inside the house. You're trying to get in, right?
Yeah.
And you are also impacted by the fumes because you also had to be taken to hospital, right?
Yes. I had some cuts on my feet from running across the glass and the gravel, and I'd lost my hair and my eyebrows and part of my eyelashes, and had flash burns on my face from trying to get into the room.
So I want to come back to that later, but I can't help but make the point. How do the police assume it to be murder when you're almost victimized yourself by your attempt to kill your child? Your life is affected. Your life was put in danger. Your well-being was compromised, and you made a genuine attempt, which was witnessed by others. It wasn't a fake attempt. You could have caused further damage and injury to yourself. That is not the action of someone. That is because murder is intentional, right? It's premeditated.
Yeah.
That's the concept of murder, right? Because without it being murder, it'd be manslaughter or death by accidental or whatever, right? But when they deem it to be murder, that means that was premeditated, intentional, right? With a view to killing an individual. Is that a clear interpretation of murder, right?
That is.
So when somebody is injured, making an attempt to rescue, save to the point where they are also hospitalized and treated, how does anybody become convinced that it was intentional?
Well, I think in our first interview, you were caught up because they decided it was an intentional fire 2 hours after the fire was put out.
That's right, because, I did say that, but I didn't say in the time span, but the 2 hours because they came to see you in the hospital, didn't they?
Yes. It hadn't even been a couple of hours, and they told me that it was an intentional fire, and somebody had come in there with the purpose of killing both of us.
But if somebody
wanted a list.
So if somebody came in there with the intention of killing both of you, how did you then become the suspect?
Well, because I was the only person there. I mean, all those people that I listed, all my family and friends, none of them were there. And they'd already determined that this was an arson. So there had to be somebody there.
So elimination by numbers.
Yes.
Wow. Anyhow, carry on telling the story, because we can come back to those points as we go through, and as our audience is listening, maybe they can throw in some comments or some questions if they feel that they want to ask anything. And please, guys, www.worldjamglobalradio.com. You can catch us on Facebook or Twitter and YouTube. We are running live right across the world on all social media platforms. If you do feel that you've got a question that you want to ask, please just throw it in there. I'd actually prefer it if you just went onto my wall, Kervin Julian, because that's the page that I've got up in front of me, and I can see every comment that comes up live on that particular page. I do appreciate all the people that are watching and listening and tuning in from different platforms from all all over the world. But what I would appreciate you do is if you went onto my wall and dropped the comments in, that's the one that I've got up in front of me. I'll be able to see it and I can respond and we can ask the question on your behalf. Okay, so I just thought I better throw that out there. Because I am aware it's shared onto about 108 different platforms right now, different social media platforms, as well as YouTube and the internet and Twitter. 3 different Twitter feeds, by the way. I just had to throw that in there too. But yeah, so you're now at the hospital and you're being treated for cuts and wounds, smoke inhalation and all the rest of that. And they've come to the hospital now to tell you that they believe it to be a deliberate arson. And it must be somebody that was known to the family. When they said that to you, when they said those words, A, it was a deliberate attempt to kill you and your child. And B, it must be somebody that was known to you. What was your thoughts and feelings then?
I mean, my first thought was everybody that was in my hospital room was a suspect. And everybody that could have possibly comforted me or been there for me in this horrible moment, I now looked at with suspicion. So I was essentially alone.
The paranoia really set in.
Yes, trying to figure out what had happened because.
So did you have family members with you at your side while you was in hospital at that moment?
Yes.
And
my dad was there, my brother was there, my mother was there, my aunt, several cousins, and several friends.
And that's within 2 hours, right?
Yes.
So as the police have now approached you and told you that it's somebody close to you, it was deliberate, and the attempt was to kill you, you're now looking at these family members that are with you, apparently turned up to comfort you and support you, with suspicion.
Yes.
Was your behavior towards them deliberately evident? Did you start to retract, distance yourself, detach yourself from conversing with them? Was it obvious?
Yes. I asked them all to leave.
Wow. The very people that turned up to love you, to support you, to care for you, to let you know that you matter to them, you're now ostracizing, alienating, and distancing.
Yes.
Isolating yourself from the very comfort that you actually needed at that moment in time.
Yes.
How did that feel, Kristine?
It was excruciating and devastating. I mean, you are looking for somebody to understand and be there, and somebody that you can trust to pour out your heart to. And of course, you're going through the different stages of grief. So I told myself at the get-go that they were lying to me, and they had just taken my son, and nobody wanted to tell me that they had took him and they were keeping him, because your mind can't really wrap around that this is happening.
Can I jump in for a second? So
Yeah.
You were literally alone after this happened in the hospital because you couldn't trust your family, and you didn't really know what had happened to your son.
Yes.
That just is mind-blowing to me. What did they say? What did they say about the why'd they say it was arson?
So they said they found pore patterns and concrete spalling, alligatoring, and window charring. And all of those are supposedly indicators of arson. They have since been debunked.
So one question. When this officer was giving you this information that was suggesting that this was deliberate based on these circumstances, whose expertise was he basing that on?
The fire marshals.
The fire marshals, was that their initial findings when they first came?
Yes.
Wow.
And I mean, they took my brother through a few hours later and my dad and told him, this is where I poured gasoline, this is where I trailed it out, and this is where I lit a match and walked away.
So
Wait.
So your family now are being walked through a crime scene, supposedly, and being given the details of how you deliberately set fire to this house, terminating the life of your young child.
Yes.
What was your family's response to that? What was your brother's response to that?
My brother's response was, that's absolutely not true. And of course, he's trying to tell me they're looking at you. They're going to point this at you. And I was like, no, they asked about everybody else. You know, I don't think that, you know, I can trust what you're saying.
So can we
and
just,
at that time,
sorry, can we just clarify this? Sorry, Kristine. So at that moment, right, you're saying, A, you didn't believe the police that the people that were in that room could have possibly been responsible, and they didn't believe that you could have done it.
Correct.
Is that where both parties were?
Yes.
And yet the investigating officers couldn't see that there was a mixed match here.
No. They felt like they had the evidence and they needed to move forward with that.
So what happened next, Kristine?
The police officers, I mean, they called me in that night. So the fire happened at 6:00 in the morning. They had me brought to the police station at 11 o'clock that night. And I went into a room with 3 of them, and they started talking to me about insurance. I was just a young mom who was working and going to school and raising a kid. So I immediately thought they found out I didn't have insurance on my car. My car had been destroyed as well. And so I said, you know, I'm sorry. I know I should have insurance on my car, but I don't. And they said, no, we're talking about the life insurance and we're talking about the home insurance. And at that point, I was dumbfounded because my kid's only 3. Why would I have life insurance on him? And if I couldn't afford car insurance, how am I going to afford insurance on my home? Essentially, I've lost everything, and there is no insurance. There's no nothing.
So go on, sorry.
At that point, they're talking to me about, you know, there has to be a reason. Did I have a boyfriend that didn't like my child? And I'm screaming at them because I can't believe that I'm in here and you're coming at me with this when I've just lost everything. And, you know, my family busted in and said, you know, this is the last interview. And I left with them. And then the detectives continued to follow me around, and they followed me to the funeral home where I was making arrangements for my child. They followed me to the clothing store where I got a suit to wear to my child's funeral. And the day after his funeral, I was arrested and charged with murder and arson.
The day after the funeral, you was arrested and charged with murder and arson.
That's correct.
How long did you spend in custody, or was you bailed on your, you know, or did you, about how long before it went to trial?
I was arrested July 5th. I didn't go to trial until March. But I was let out on bond because the test results come back and said they couldn't find gasoline. And they had pretty much placed the whole case on gasoline because they had found a gallon gas can sitting next to my lawnmower outside. So
but based on the trace marks, the trail marks, the footpaths that they claimed where you walked and lit it from and through the match or whatever. I mean, surely in all of that area there would have been forensically investigating the findings to prove that there was fuel, petrol, whatever it was. Something that expedited that flame, that fire combustible, whatever. Surely that they would have needed that as concrete evidence to base a charge of arson, let alone the murder.
They claimed that they had found a heavy petroleum distillate. They couldn't fully identify it, but it was only in one area of the floor, and they'd found it in the wood flooring, not the carpet, not the padding, not anything that was on top. And the previous owner had said that he'd used a kerosene heater in there when he remodeled. And so they had an explanation for that. It wasn't until later that they said they'd found the same heavy petroleum distillate in one sample in my son's bedroom. We actually found that out at trial. And, of course, I was convicted, because how can you find an accelerant in a child's bedroom and not say it was an arson?
Yeah. So I suppose in a sense you understand how they came to that conclusion, but you're still innocent, right? So
absolutely. I knew how they come to that conclusion. But I knew that I didn't do it. And at that time, I mean, my brother had already stepped up. He had already told me, I've been researching. When you get, to jail, you don't ask anybody for anything. He said, I've got a job and I will send you money. And he said, you take care of yourself. He said, don't depend on anybody else. You've got to be safe. He said, this is going to get worked out. And he was only a kid, but I trusted him and I believed him.
I just can't help but just love this young man, this brother of yours. I don't know him, I've never met him, but I feel absolutely humble to hear of his involvement in your life and support from the get-go, which would have been a difficult thing for anybody. Let's not get this twisted or mixed up. This young man who was 17, probably 16 initially, going on to 17 and then obviously 17, is walked through the home and told and shown all of this evidence by impressionable police officers and detectives that this is what his sister has done. And I would have imagined most people would have just had a shock, horror experience in that moment, because the only thought that anybody with any common sense really would have had would have been for the child. You'd have been additional to the equation. Do you understand where I'm coming from, Kristine? Initially,
yes, absolutely.
The whole thought would have been the innocent 3-year-old child, defenseless child that could not defend or speak for itself. That's where everybody's thoughts and focus would be. But this brother of yours, even with all of this being put to him as a young, inexperienced person of the world, so to speak, and I don't want to misjudge him in any way. Maybe he was wiser in his years than I know, but I'm hazarding a guess that he still had a lot of life left to live. But with all of this weight of evidence being presented to him, stood steadfast in support of his sister, defying the evidence that was being presented as the truth, and believing in the love that he had for you, that it was impossible for you to be guilty of this thing that they are accusing you of. So much so that he gives up his life, he gives up his future, he gives up his potential to become whatever it was that he could have become. Quit college or school or whatever it was that he quit to play dad to your child and support you. How was that experience while you were waiting for that trial? Because at that point, you actually hadn't given birth yet. You was carrying the child, I take it.
Yes. I mean, it was hard. You couldn't tell anybody really what was going on. You couldn't talk to anybody. You're facing these horrible charges. And I mean, my brother was the person that I talked to, the person that I told I was scared and I was worried that I was going to lose this baby as well. And he's the person that took everything I said to heart, and it changed his life as well.
He became a man very quickly. So you've gone through the bail sequence. You're now going to trial. What's your mindset as you're going into this trial? What are you thinking? It won't be much longer and I'm going home?
Yeah. I mean, you think, innocent people don't go to prison. And I knew that I hadn't started a fire. I knew that would have never occurred to me. And I thought, I'm going to get through this. And it just didn't play out like that.
Tell me, how was it playing out? When did you start to realize that this case wasn't going your way?
I think when the fireman who went in to get my son's body changed his testimony right before trial and said, because at first they had said that I'd closed and locked that door. Then they found out that there wasn't a door on his bedroom because I was worried about him getting in there and closing the door. And so then they had the fireman say that I'd shoved a chair in that doorway to block him in. And then the test results come back stating that they had found a heavy petroleum distillate that they could not identify in his bedroom. So at that,
can I say something?
Yes,
really quick. I just had a huge fire this summer. Our entire barn was burned to the ground and everything I owned in it. Here's what I thought. All the soot and everything else reeked of kerosene. And there's no reason for it. I haven't looked into it. I figured there must have been something that happens in the process of a fire. I mean, you would think that firemen would know about that, but if they can't identify it, I know what it smells like, and I can't get my head wrapped around that. So I just wanted to put that out there.
So you're going through this trial. It now begins to dawn on you that this case is not going your way. What are your thoughts? What are you thinking? Because you're on trial. You're carrying another child. You're still grieving for the one that you've lost, or trying to grieve for the one that you've lost while you fight for your life. You've got these people standing up and saying things about you to people that don't even know you, who are beginning to believe them, who've not got the chance to get to know you or even understood where you are or where you're coming from in all of this. And people are looking at you with a different view based on this evidence that's being given by fire marshals, police officers, and other so-called experts. And here you are, depending on a jury of your peers to be able to see through this BS and just know that you couldn't have done this. Were you looking at the jury while this was going on? Were you trying to gauge a reaction from them to see whether or not they were falling for this? Was any part of you hopeful that there might be anybody in there that would be, kind of compassionate to your way and maybe, influence the jury not to? Was there anything that you could grab as a straw of hope in the midst of all of this chaos? I suppose it's a question that I'm asking you.
there was nothing. I mean, I would try to look at the jury, but I was already told by my public defender that, you know, my hair was too big and I often wore too much eye makeup and my clothes had to cover all of me. I couldn't show any throat and I couldn't show any emotions. And every day he would drill that in, you know, don't react. Don't let them see you reacting. You need to act like, you know, this is just any other day. And it was so hard to just sit there and listen to this play out and know that it's your life and you have to trust somebody else to be your voice. You have to trust that they know what they're doing and that they're going to protect you.
You know, I don't think any of us can begin to imagine this experience that you were going through. We all have to have, without hope, there is nothing. Absolutely nothing without hope. And your hope was fading fast. While the trial was going on, you're obviously still in custody. Were you still getting visits from your family members?
Yes. My friends dropped off. I didn't see or hear from any of them, but my family stuck by me. And of course, none of them were allowed to be in the courtroom with me because the prosecutor had put all of them on a witness list. So they didn't know what was going on in there until after we come out.
Wow. So, isolated, on your own, hope fading fast, heading towards the jury retiring to consider their verdict. Prosecution have laid out their case. Your defense, the best that they did, which to me was still not good enough. In fact, let's just pause and have a thought about that for a second. Now that you know what you know and have been through what you've been through, what do you think about the defense that was put up for you while you was going through that trial?
Well, I mean, I speak about this quite often. Public defenders don't have the resources to compete with the prosecution. So if you're talking about expert testimony, expert witnesses, you know, whether it's fire science, blood spatter analysis, DNA, fingerprints, it's stacked against them if you can't afford a huge lawyer. If you have to go in with a public defender, you know you're going to have limited resources and you won't have what you need to truly fight against the allegations that are coming in against you.
Sorry, so we've got Patrick Lane is asking, were plea deals offered?
A plea deal was offered. If I would plead guilty to arson, they would dismiss the murder charge and give me 15 to 7.5.
So why would they dismiss the murder charge if they were convinced that you committed murder? Did that not do?
I felt like they wanted a conviction. It didn't matter what conviction.
The bottom line is it would have been easier to have just got rid of the arson. And is not murder the heavier sentence? Would that not be a heavier sentence than arson?
Yes.
So, you know, to get rid of the arson, because I think, if I remember correctly, he was sentenced 40 years. What was the sentences again? Sorry.
I got 50 years for the arson and 60 for the murder.
So you got 50 years for the arson, 60 years for the murder. So that would have been just, you know, if you still have had to serve a heavier sentence, but it would have been easier just to take the arson off the table if you would plead guilty to murder, because that's ultimately what they're saying. So I suppose if you pleaded guilty to the arson, and here's the thing, because this is where the twist comes, right? From the moment you plead guilty to the arson, you're already admitting that you're guilty to the murder.
Yes.
I just wanted to repeat
And
that.
of course,
I just wanted to repeat that so we actually get an understanding of that. The moment you pleaded guilty to the arson, it would have meant that you were guilty to the murder. What was your thoughts when they were offering you this plea deal?
I didn't have any thoughts. I said, I'm not taking a plea. I'm innocent. And of course, my public defender argued. And, some of my family said I should consider it. My brother was the one that said, you know what, we don't admit to something we didn't do to get what we want.
You know, the more I hear about your brother is the more I love him. I love him. Just when you speak to him next, just tell him I love him. My prayers, everything that a man should be is what your brother is. I absolutely love him. A tower of strength just when you needed it, whenever you needed it, as long as you needed it from the get-go right through to the very end. A wonderful human being indeed. Sorry, I just feel the need to just keep saying that because he's a remarkable, remarkable young man. So you're waiting for the jury to retire and consider their verdict. Were you given any advice going into this period where the jury were going to consider their verdict? And then once you've answered that question, the next question I've got for you is, how long did they retire to consider their verdict?
There was no advice given. He said, we just wait, and that's it. And it took them 4 hours to decide that I was guilty.
Wow. So you sit back, you wait, and it came back as guilty. Did they adjourn for sentencing, or did they sentence you straight away?
They had they sentenced me straight away, and the jury had left for that, and my judge said that I was never going to see this child, that he felt like I had gotten myself impregnated to get sympathy from the court, and they were going to show me no sympathy because of it. And then he said 50 for the arson, 60 for the murder. He was going to run them concurrently, which means they're merged, and I will have a set sentence of 60 years, do 30 in the Department of Corrections. And I was dismissed. And so when my family came over to see me...
Let's pause there. Before your family came over to see you, you're sitting down in court. You've gone through this incredible experience, soul-destroying to say the least. You've come to the end of it. Initially, when you started, you had hope. But as the trial went on, you lost hope. You've got to this point where you realize it's not going in your favor, and then they come back with a guilty verdict, and the judge is absolutely unsympathetic. More importantly, he really wants to throw the book at you and make you feel his pain, and gives you 50 years for arson and 60 years for murder. We're not talking about 6 months to 2 years, 4 years, 3 years, etc. He's talking in multiple of decades. And just remind the audience how young you were at this moment in time.
I was 21.
21.
I turned 22 5 months after.
So at 21, you're being sentenced to the minimum of 50 years and another one at 60 years. So if you was to serve your full sentence, they're telling you that you're not coming out until you're 80. That's the whole of your life. You're in the dock. The judge has sentenced you. What was your immediate feelings and thoughts?
I didn't want them to take my baby. I didn't care what they did to me, but I wanted him to know about me, and I wanted him to know my family. And so my family is talking about, well, that we're going to appeal and we're going to fight it. And I'm sitting there crying, telling them I'm going to lose my whole life, and I don't care. I just want them to save my baby.
At any time, Kristine, did you just think that's it, your life's over, it ain't worth living?
Yeah. There were many, many times. There are still many, many times that I wake up and think, if I'd only stayed asleep, if I'd have never woke up, if I'd have just went with the fire, none of this would have happened. But on the flip side of that, I am stronger, more capable than I ever knew that I could be.
You're a walking powerhouse, is what you are, a living miracle. And we're honoured and privileged to share this planet with you. So you're sentenced to 50 years for arson, 60 years for murder, and now the judge says those infamous words, take her away, or whatever it is. And you, I mean, for those of you that go to prison or have not been to prison, once you're sentenced, I don't know how it is in the States, but here in the UK, you're taken downstairs and you're in the holding cell waiting for the vehicle to come and pick you up that's going to take you to the prison that you've been allocated to. And you have those moments where somebody might be able to come in and visit you. You're normally your barrister, your solicitor, your lawyer, your attorney, whichever terminology you guys use. But sometimes you're just left on your own. So those thoughts, Kristine, those thoughts while you're down in that cell, in the block, behind those doors, waiting to be collected, to be taken to the prison that you'll now spend the next however long. What was your thinking then?
Oh, well, I actually spent another almost a month in the county jail waiting to be transported. And my family was able to come see me. My thoughts, my concerns were because I was pregnant, and I had to be transferred much sooner than what they thought, because I ended up getting sick in the county jail. They didn't think about me being pregnant, and it wasn't high on their list of whether I should be getting, lots of water and milk, those kind of things. So I developed a urinary tract infection and was running a high fever. My family had to call the sheriff repeatedly in order to get me taken to a doctor. And when I was taken to the doctor, he said, you are not equipped to deal with a pregnant woman. And then I was transferred.
So you get to prison. You're carrying your child. How long into your sentence before you gave birth?
I got there on April Fool's Day of 96, and I gave birth July 22nd.
So kind of
3 months.
3 months. 3 months you carry your child. Probably the most important stages of that pregnancy, as you begin to see the growth in your belly as it begins to take shape, and you begin to feel the weight as you carry it, and you start to look towards the day that you would go into labor and deliver your child, knowing that your child was going to be born while you were in prison. How did that make you feel?
I mean, I was devastated. The very first thing I did when I got to prison was go to the law library and determine that the judge had failed to issue an order saying they were taking my child. So that meant that my family could take him. But on the flip side of that, I had this huge sentence hanging over me. So you war within yourself on what's the best thing to do for your child. Should you give him up for adoption? Should you, just let him never know who you are and have a good life? Or do you continue to fight?
What gave you the strength to decide to continue to fight? Because you're talking about 50 and 60 years. The potential was at least 20 years plus you were going to be in prison. Your child would be a full-grown adult by the time he was released anyway, with no recollection of any form of mothering that you might have been able to input or contribute to their lives. What made you want to hold on and fight?
My brother.
Here he goes. Listen, this guy is going to come on this show. We got to have him. We got to have him on this show. The next time we talk about your story, your brother has to be here on this show to feel the love that I'm quite sure the audience would want to give him.
Okay. We will make that happen.
Okay. So tell me what it was that your brother was saying. What was he doing at this time that was giving you the strength to fight and carry on?
He sat me down and said that, it wasn't going to be good. It wasn't going to be easy, but he would help. And it's hard to look at somebody that young and think, yes, we can make it through this, and yes, we can do this. And I believed him.
I mean, most women would have said, help how? What, you going to breastfeed? You're going to change nappies? You're going to change diapers? You're going to clean up the poo? You're going to wipe up the vomit? Are you going to do that? I mean, that would have been the immediate thought of most women when a young man, 17-year-old man at that, who was still in school, right, steps up to the plate and says, "It's okay, I play mama and dada." Isn't it? Your thoughts has to be, how on earth you can't even take care of yourself? How are you going to take care of my baby?
He actually had a plan. My mom was disabled and couldn't really leave the house. And he said, she can't work. He said, I'm going to move in with her. He said, we're going to take the baby. He said, I'm going to work. He said, nonstop. And he said, we're going to get another lawyer. And he said, we're going to have the baby here to visit you all the time. And he said, we can make this work.
So at that point, did you believe in everything that he said, including that we're going to get through this and we're going to get you out?
No. But I believed that, he would be there for my kid. And I believed that he would know the kind of person that I was. And that was, I think, more important at that moment than me getting out.
So you're in prison now. You're looking at 50 years for arson, 60 years for murder. Potentially the best part of all of your life spent behind bars. How do you begin to settle yourself in and work out what you're going to do from here? In fact, how long did it take you to settle? And what was that settling period like?
Whew, I don't think I ever settled. A lot of people that I was incarcerated with, have come back and said, since then, I used to tease you all the time for being at the law library or having your nose in those books. And look at what you did. And so I wrote letters.
Just look at what you did.
Yes.
We're going to talk about that in a minute. But carry on.
I wrote letters every week. I immediately got a job at the law library, and I was a GED tutor. And I spent my free time learning about fires.
And
I received hardly no response back from my letters. And I mean, I made sure that I was busy. You could be off of your dorm from 6 a.m. until 11 p.m. when lights were out. And so I'd work 2 or 3 jobs, or I would go to school and work 2 jobs. I made sure that I was out the entire time. And during that time, I befriended a pregnant girl, and I would bring her back cookies and things like that, because people did that for me while I was pregnant. And it's hard being in there and being pregnant and having this horrible sentence, and people treat you funny, but there were a few that were kind. And that pregnant girl ended up recommending her attorney. And so I'd been there probably 4 years when I was able to get enough money to say, okay, I can hire you.
Was that the changing point?
I think it was for me, simply because she read through everything, and she came in there and said, I believe you. I just don't know how we're going to prove it. And I mean, for me, that was somebody that was brand new, that didn't know me, knew nothing about me or my family, and she believed me.
Yeah.
And
sometimes that's all we need, is just somebody to believe us, right?
Yes.
Somebody with influence. So you embark on this journey of investigative conviction, commitments to prove your innocence, and you've now got an attorney on board that believes in you enough to want to fight the right fight. And I take it that things beginning to unravel as you embark on this journey with this attorney?
Yes, we talked a fire investigator into giving us 20 hours pro bono, and he started looking over the evidence, because in 2000 a report had been issued that all those indicators of arson were no longer indicators. So the burn patterns, the pour patterns, the V patterns, the concrete's falling, the alligatoring, everything that they had listed in my case that was supposed to be an indicator of arson had now been disproven and called a myth. So I was confused as to why I would be convicted on something that's now a myth.
Do you know, apart from this attorney that you embarked on this journey with, did you get any media attention? Did you get any other forms of publicity? Did any other outside agencies, organizations, etc., get involved and support and
So at first, no. And then one of the church volunteers that I worked with, she reached out to the Center on Wrongful Convictions, which is part of the Innocence Network. And they officially come onto my case 5 years after I had gotten the attorney. At that point, media got involved, and we started looking back through the evidence. At that point, I had asked that they get the ATF file, because it didn't make sense to me that they couldn't identify this accelerant, because everything I had read and learned said that, no, we should be able to identify it.
That should be the first and easiest thing to be able to identify in order to prove that this was arson or it was started deliberately.
Exactly. So when they got that file, that was really our moment, because they found the original report that said the only thing that had been found had been the faint traces of kerosene in this circular pattern where the kerosene heater had previously sat before. And nothing had been found in my son's bedroom, and the furniture, and his mattress, and the carpet, the padding.
But they'd said that it'd been found in your son's bedroom, and you said you also said you could understand why the jury were able to believe that it was murder or deliberate because of what was found in your son's bedroom.
Absolutely. But they didn't know that they had received an altered report. I didn't know that they had received an altered report.
Let's stop right there, shall we? Wait a minute. Pull it back. So what you're now saying is the first report that was made and used to charge you with murder and arson was a doctored and altered report by whom?
The ATF.
Why would they do such a thing? To fit in the police, to fit in with the police's remit. Do you think that at any point that the ATFs were forced to bring out that report in order to support the findings or the direction that the law enforcement wanted to take as far as pursuing a charge against you?
Honestly, I don't know what reason they would have to do that, but for whatever reason, they did.
Do you know, Stephanie, I hope you're listening. We're really meant to be bringing in Stephanie soon. I wasn't planning to be in this for as long as we are, but there is just so much that are still yet to be told in this story. Was there anything that you wanted to come in with, Stephanie, while you're in the sidelines listening?
Oh, I'm just taken away. I'm just sitting here listening along with everybody else. There's so much to this story. But I do have a question. What's your brother's name again?
His name is Michael.
Michael. I just want to...
And for anybody listening, he is a great guy, and he's single.
Oh, that's awesome.
So you're out there trying to find a wife for him now?
Yes.
He deserves that. He absolutely deserves that. If there's anything that this show can do to work towards putting them together, then let's do it, right? He deserves that. He put his life on hold for 17 years so that he can play father to your child and give you the hope that you needed to battle to get yourself free. He deserves that. Any single ladies out there, or anybody who knows any single ladies, yeah, let's get it on. Let's find a wife for Michael, shall we?
Also, I wanted to ask, what was your child's name? What's your child's name that you lost?
His name was Tony.
I just want to put that out there that I'm so, and yeah, that's a lot.
Okay, so stop me getting emotional now, please, Steph.
Well, it's important to me because our children, her brother, those are the people that we rely on to get through the parts of our lives that we don't think we can do by ourselves.
Yeah. And Kristine would have never been able to have got through this without Tony.
Yeah.
No.
Michael.
Tony is the child. Michael's the brother, the one that we want to find a girlfriend for. A wife. Okay.
That's awesome.
So, you find this ATF report, and it just blows the thing wide open.
It throws it wide open, but we also found new evidence because fire science has been changing since this fire happened in 1995. So they were actually able to use Tony's autopsy report to determine cause of fire.
Wow.
So, and like you said, you're a fire expert now. You've spent all those years researching this.
So using Tony's autopsy to determine the cause of fire, what were their findings?
Well, their findings were that it couldn't have been an arson because he didn't die because of thermal injuries. He died from smoke inhalation and carbon monoxide poisoning. his blood level had actually gotten to an 80% carboxyhemoglobin, which means that by the time the fire broke out and I woke up, he was already gone.
Yeah.
From the inhalation.
And so an arson burns very hot, very fast, and doesn't give off a whole lot of carbon monoxide. But an underventilated electrical fire that starts in the wall or a ceiling, some kind of contained space, gives off a huge amount of carbon monoxide before it initially
ignites into a fire. Yeah, that's correct.
Yes.
So here's the thing. That's what they eventually determined was the genuine, original cause of the fire, wasn't it?
Yes.
An electrical
fire. They said it was
fire.
an electrical fire that started in either the upper wall or the ceiling.
And this was divulged, came to light after 14 years.
Yes.
Wow.
How was that information uncovered?
The ATF report was uncovered through a federal subpoena, and the fire investigator that we talked into giving us 20 hours pro bono, they are the ones that brought in the forensic toxicologist who determined that cause of fire was electrical and not arson. And it's funny, when the Center on Wrongful Convictions came on, I said, oh, by the way, we have a fire person named Jamie who's working on this, and you should probably contact her. And then when they did, they got a huge surprise because she was the forensic toxicologist that came in with the new fire science.
Wow. Blown away. Absolutely blown away. So now you have the evidence that you need that can free you. But you're not freed yet.
No. It takes another 3 years.
What's the reasoning behind the 3-year delay in finding the evidence that proves your innocence, yet still keeps you incarcerated?
Well, I mean, the main thing is when you go back in, you are going back in front of your original judge and original prosecutor. So neither one of them thought very highly of me to begin with. That hasn't changed just because we found this evidence. So we took 2 days and presented the evidence, and the evidence that was presented was so compelling that you could see a change in how I was treated at the jail versus how I was treated before.
Are you talking about that 14-year part where you get that evidence that it was not a fire, it wasn't arson, but it was accidental? Was that the point that it changed?
I started receiving normal food instead of, green bread and very, very yucky water. And people started, talking to me and asking me, how do we think this is going to go? And I'm really encouraged by what the newspaper said. Did you read it? And they brought me back the paper so I could read it. And I mean, that was huge compared to how it was when I was first brought to jail and nobody spoke to me, and they barely remembered to bring me back anything to eat.
Let me just touch on that for a moment, because for those of you that don't realize, for what you were sentenced for, what they were deeming you to be guilty of, is one of the most heinous and horrendous crimes that anybody can go to prison for. And the way that somebody is treated in jail when there's a child involved, it's absolutely horrendous, right?
Yes, it's horrible.
I mean, if you could imagine how Corey Wise was treated as the Central Park Five, where there was, the rape of that woman was involved, rape and child molestation or child murder or anything involved in children. And these are the sort of crimes where prisoners take out all their hate on you, right?
Yes. Every bit of ugliness comes to you because you are the scum of the earth.
Wow. I'm just... So, okay.
So my original judge and prosecutor took as long as they could to deny the motion. And then we were told that it was going to go to the appellate court. They did bring me another plea agreement and told me that if I would just dismiss everything and plead guilty to arson, that they would give me the original plea agreement and I could go home. And so my lawyers presented that to me. And at that point, I wanted to go home more than anything in the world. But at that point, it wasn't just me. I had a child that my brother and my mom had made sure was there every week, every other week to see me. And I knew that there was no guarantee that I was coming home. And the only thing that I could give him was who I was as a person. And I wasn't going to teach him that it's okay to say a lie in order to get what you want.
So you turned down that deal?
I turned down that deal. I was told that we had a 1 in 100 chance of getting picked for the appellate court to give an oral argument. And I said, we need to try. I think we're gonna make it. And they gave oral argument 6 months later. And then it took another 3 for them to rule that they were reversing the conviction based on the altered report and a Brady violation and the new fire science that we had submitted. So I was reversed and remanded. They felt like I needed a fair trial to prove that what I was saying was true. I was released August 22nd of 2012, which was 17 years, 3 months, and 16 days, so many hours after this started. And they let me sit for 3 months and then said they were dismissing all charges. So I was exonerated December 18th.
Wow. Absolutely. Okay. I got to just kind of try and pull myself together here, Kristine, if you don't mind. I need a moment.
Okay.
I really, taking my hat off, saluting you, it's a cheap, corny cliche. What you have been through, what you went through, what you lived through, what you came through, is an amazing testimony to the remarkable woman that you are. For you to have gone through that, and we're going to talk about the support of your family very shortly, because I'm quite sure that Stephanie's champing at the bit now, and we're going to get her in very shortly. But so they release you. Your first thoughts, because what happens? Were you released from court or were you released from the prison?
I was released from the jail.
Okay.
So after I was pulled into the court, they said they were going to reinstate my original bond, which wasn't returned to my family. And then when they decided that they were going to set a new court date, I was taken over to the jail and processed out. And when I walked out, I mean, yes, everyone was there, and I thought, oh, this is the moment. This is everything I wanted. And then the fear sets in, because what are you going to do after 17 years? And how are you going to pay rent? And how are you going to get to a job? And I didn't have a toothbrush. I didn't have identification. I didn't have clothes. I had my prison uniform. So it's it's overwhelming and very, I guess, shocking. It's like you're, pulled through this wall of water and you get to the other side and you have trouble figuring out how you're supposed to breathe and walk in this new environment that you don't recognize because so much time has passed.
So, Michael was your brother's, is your brother's name. Tony was the child that you lost. What's the name of the one that you gave birth to in prison that's still alive today?
Trent.
Trent. So Trent got to meet his mother as a free person for the first time in an open arena. Where was that? Where did that meeting take place? Where you first got to hold your son, whom you gave birth to in prison. What was that? Where was that place, and what was that moment like when you got to meet him as a free?
It was at the Decatur County Jail, right outside in the parking lot. And it was incredible, but then that whole sense of responsibility hits you because I now have a teenager. I skipped everything in between, and I have a teenager, and how am I going to take care of him? And how am I going to take care of myself?
So no breastfeeding, no diapers changing, no cleaning up the the vomit, no baby tantrums, no banging of tipping over of the porridge on the floor, and so you missed all of that fun. Huh?
Yes.
And you got a straight up teenager.
Yes, and of course, teenagers are difficult to read. So I didn't know, was he happy about it? Was he embarrassed about it? Was he mad about it? What was it going to do to his life? And then that first night after, the celebratory dinner is over with all of my attorneys, and I'm just hanging out with him, and he's showing me Facebook, and he said, this is a way that everybody can connect with you. And he took, my very first picture on Facebook, the little screenshot. And I'm looking at his laptop, and I noticed the appellate court site is bookmarked. And I said, what is that for? And he said, because I checked every day to see if you were coming home. And that was the moment that I knew that he believed in me, and he supported everything I was doing, and he wanted me.
That must have been a real moment of acceptance to know that the one who you were sacrificed from also waited and believed in you.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a moment to compose yourself, because I kind of need a moment to compose myself too. A grown man crying and blubbering on live radio ain't good. I'm so glad that the picture is frozen. I'm hoping that your picture is frozen as well. Well, the audience, I'm hoping that their picture is frozen as well as mine is frozen. I'm hoping that it's just not a software glitch my end. I'm really hoping on this occasion that you guys just can't see the state that I'm in. Let's bring in Stephanie Babb, because not everybody gets to have this family reunion that Kristine got to experience, and the impact for some families can be far worse.
Hey, so you literally went in a baby yourself and you came out a warrior. You put all your time and energy into learning, and you held on, and then you come out and you have to start all over again. And you have done so much since then, and you go out and speak to schools. You do so much. your family has got to be incredibly proud, because I got the chills just listening to this. There are no words. And I can't imagine sitting in that place for so long, knowing in your heart that you were not at fault and you lost your child. That to me is mind blowing and so tragic.
And the reality of it is, Steph, she didn't just lose one child. She was potentially losing two, because she was never going to get to see the one that she gave birth to while she was incarcerated grow up as a mother should.
That's right. And your family bringing Trent to you every week is such a dedication, and that's such loyalty. That is, I think that's what people that are incarcerated need. They need that support. I don't think enough people get that support. And it all comes back down to the fact that you were put in prison for what reason? Because somebody didn't want to investigate, or they decided for some reason that this was the way they were going to go. I want, coming back to that still amazes me. And I don't understand. But it happens all the time, as you're well aware, I'm sure.
Yes, definitely. I would say that it was eye-opening to learn that arson investigators, fire investigators, many of them did not even have to be certified. They would learn from the previous person on the job, and he would say, when you see this or these signs, that means it's an arson.
You're kidding. That's, wow. A lot of science there, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. In any form of engineering, constructural, hazard environments, dealing with chemical waste and all of these, you are expected to go through certain training routines that gives you not necessarily a knowledge of expertise, but a knowledge and understanding. And you're telling me that you've got these guys who are making these decisions, that are filling out these reports, that are passing on this information to newbies and newcomers, wannabes who just decided to take a change of career or whatever, with simple hearsay? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that if you went in when my fire took place and you wanted to be a fire investigator, you would learn on the job. That would be your certification.
Wow. So this guy who went in had no real experience. This was him being certified.
Yes. That has changed now, and they are using the National Fire Protection Agency's Manual 921 to look at fires and apply scientific method now. But before this happened, how many others had a fire that was misdiagnosed? How many other people sitting in prison for the same circumstances?
So, the theme of the show is, where do we go from now? Where do we go from here? So, where do we go from here, Kristine?
Well, I mean, honestly, when I came out, there was virtually no support. So I started a non-for-profit, Justice for Just Us, Inc. is primarily for exonerees. We have hooked up some counselors with family members as well, because I see the long-term impact this has on family. They're the ones incarcerated with you. They live it with you. In my free time, I go help with legislative issues, because I believe our voice can make a difference, can change things for the better. And we were able to get compensation passed in Indiana this past legislative year.
Sorry, Kristine. Talking about compensation, were you ever compensated for what you went through in the wrongful conviction that was imposed on you?
No.
Never.
No.
Oh my God. That's
17 years of your life taken, absolutely destroyed. A child robbed of her mother, and a mother not allowed to grieve for the loss of her 3-year-old child, and you did not get compensated.
No. Most don't.
There's something so wrong with that. There is something.
And then I do speaking engagements to raise awareness in our communities that these things can happen. And I've done several police trainings because I believe that police officers are the first ones on the scene. And if they have knowledge that these kind of things can happen, that we have biases, that we have peer pressure from more experienced people on our staff, that a wrongful conviction can occur. So I believe education is the key to changing this for everybody.
Do you think that they went ahead and just wanted the conviction? I mean, that's kind of what they all go for, and they just ignored some of the more obvious things of you being a young mother and what would be the motive for that?
Yes, and not every state has to prove motive. I mean, Indiana, you don't have to prove a motive. So, attacking these legislative issues, I feel like is a way to really turn the tide, because most of the time they are just looking for the conviction.
Going back to
because it brings money.
Yeah. So going back to the ATF who done the original report, and the officer who came to see you after 2 hours, bearing in mind, as Stephanie managed to draw out of you, that at that point you were still unaware of the condition that your child was in. You weren't aware that Tony had now ceased to exist. But you're in hospital, unaware that you've lost your child. You are aware that the child was at the fire. You know that, obviously, but you are unaware of his current condition and well-being, and you are being treated for your own overcoming of the situation, the flames, the glass, the gravel, the cuts and lacerations that you had, and an officer comes to you knowing that you have tried to, because they must have known, they must have asked questions, because I take it that there were neighbors, there were people around next door, outside, across the road, as you were trying to gain entry. Yes? No?
Yes.
And part of their investigation would have been that they would have interviewed those individuals as to what they might have seen take place, in case they saw you setting fire to the place, if that being the case, or right? So they would, and those people would have told them, well, they've had to stop you. They had to stop you from going back into the house. So all of that would have been evident. So was all of that, were all of those statements submitted as part of your defense?
Yes, they were. But the hard part is there were so many conflicting statements. Like, one neighbor said he forcibly kept me out. Another one had a nervous breakdown because he said he kept hearing my screams. And he testified to that all he could hear when he closed his eyes was me screaming for my baby. And then yet another neighbor who didn't see anything and didn't know me said that she thought I was out of my mind on drugs and I was saying things that didn't make sense.
Well, you are hysterical. Your house is on fire and you've got a 3-year-old child inside. I'd imagine you were saying things that didn't make sense.
Yes. But they didn't look at that.
But what I don't get what really knocks me for six is that somebody else who had to oversee the report or the investigation didn't see the gaps, the gaping holes that were quite clear and apparent in the small amount of time that we've had to discuss this case. And we haven't got the privilege of all the witnesses and forensic evidence and years of knowledge and experience in our favor. We're just going with gut instinct here. And I'm talking about me, I'm talking about Stephanie, I'm talking about our audience who are commenting wildly on these streams as we speak. And we can see the gaping holes. I can't get how there's no one overseeing the final report that gets submitted for trial and saying, hang on a minute, guys, this don't add up. How do we change that? How do we change the process where people can make these type of statements, bring about these type of cases, get about these types of convictions, while all of this obvious, staring you in the face information goes unchallenged?
Well, for the people that have already been convicted, we need conviction integrity units that are willing to go back in and reinvestigate claims of innocence. And for the people that are going through, we need somebody over our prosecutors, somebody that is saying, okay, no, we need to reinvestigate this case. We need somebody over our experts that we are allowing to testify in court saying, okay, yes, this can be backed up scientifically. And we just don't have that yet.
Yeah, because it's the solution that would actually work. And as we all know in this unfortunate community, is that's what we keep running upon. I am one of the things that you being on the round table, you know, when my brother was killed, I was thrust into this position of having to look into everything. And I just, what takes me back is the fact that you're so young. You didn't have the support. You didn't have the money, the resources, and this nightmare that just kept unrolling on you every single day. And the people that treated you like that, that in and of itself, that's what like I said before, that makes you a warrior on every level. And then to go out, when you get out and continue to help and look for the solution. Our system is so irretrievably messed up right now, and it takes people like you becoming a fire expert while you're in prison so you can know about these things, and starting your own nonprofit to help those people that are in there that have no hope and no resources. And you said something about the Innocence Project. Tell me, I don't know much about that, but I'd love to know.
Okay, the Innocence Project was started in the early 90s, and it's housed in New York, and they were doing DNA exonerations only. It has since branched off, and we have an Innocence Network. So those are Innocence Projects that are affiliated with the Innocence Project. They're located in all states. If you don't have a state that's covered, you can probably look at the next state and they will cover you as well. I know Rocky Mountain Innocence Center covers 3 states. Mm-hmm. And generally they're housed at a law school so that law students can work on the cases and help keep down the costs So mine was located at Northwestern University. And each one of those will go back in and look at a conviction.
So what about the people that have been exonerated and released? What kind of support, if any, do they get? Is there a program or anything?
So my organization is just 2 years old, and we haven't received a whole lot of donations to help other exonerees. We're hoping to grow and expand and get more. We only have 35 states that compensate right now. That's soon going to be 36. So the other ones, they're just out. They have nothing. So we receive a lot of calls that people have just been thrown out and, they need an outfit to wear, or they need hygiene, or different items like that we don't think about. But essentially everything we use on a day-to-day basis, we're rebuilding. We have to start over from scratch. So we need all of that replaced.
Like a toothbrush, like you said, when you came out. And that's...
But I mean, we aren't thinking about, they don't have a credit history, a job history, renter's history, ID.
Yep.
Just the basics for them to step into existence.
Yes.
So somebody who's been exonerated, do they have anything like probation? Do they have to keep checking in, or they are just literally set out the door? And
they're literally set out the door. Most of the time they don't even get an I'm sorry. They're out. That's it. And you hope that there's somebody there to pick them up. You hope that, somebody's going to step up and help them.
Wow. That's today's system. That to me is tragic on every level. People that are put in prison, no fault of their own, absolutely innocent, and this is a life sentence, regardless of where they're at.
But here's the thing. Kristine could have come out of prison, gone and wrapped herself up in her brother and most importantly her young child, Trent, spent her time hugging and making up for all of the lost years that was robbed from her being a mother and a sister. But she chose to roll up her sleeves and get in the fight against wrongful convictions, and has been doing so ever since. And
that's exactly right.
You've made tremendous headway in breaking down some real, brick walls that have stood in the way of people progressing and moving forward with their lives upon release. I want to talk about what you see as the strategic plan in trying to really bring about the change that you want to see. And how do we mobilize ourselves to put ourselves in a position where we have a chance of influencing the decision makers that could enforce that change that we need to see?
I mean, honestly, we need oversight. We need people that are willing to step up and say, hey, we need to take a look at what they're doing, instead of just giving them a card and saying they are free to go do whatever they want. And that takes, people being willing to stand up and raise their voice and say, hey, we need some change here. We need to be asking our prosecutors, our judges, our senators, our congressmen, where do you stand on criminal justice reform? Where do you stand on how our system is run? Where do you stand on what is being done in our justice system? And until we start making them accountable, we're never going to change anything.
So it really starts with the people that we're voting in, right?
Yeah.
And so how do we go about influencing people to understand the questions that they need to be asking in order for them to make a good foundational decision on which candidate they're likely to support and vote for?
Well, I mean, I tell everybody, if you're just learning about wrongful convictions, the things that are going on with our judicial system, you can go to the Innocence Project website and get a ton of information, a ton of resources to look at, and you can really educate yourself on what's happening in each state. You can also reach out to them because they have state policy advocates that work out of that New York office, and they will come anywhere. They came to Indiana when we started working on compensation here, and they helped to get this compensation bill passed. They do it all over the country, and they're willing to step up and help normal people get things done, make change. It's a great way to familiarize yourself. If you don't have somebody speaking and educating in your community, you can find that out on your own, and it doesn't cost you anything. All you have to do is step up and raise your voice along with them, and we can bring about change.
So when we see politicians on the campaign trail, they have this agenda that they have, which normally, and I know the US is quite similarly based that way as well. Some of the important things that they have on their agenda: immigration, in America it's the gun law, unemployment, trade, the price of the dollar worldwide, the state of the economy. These are the main things that politicians trying to woo their voters with. And
yes.
we as a people have got to stop being so damn shallow, right? That the only thing that we can think about is what's best for us personally and individually. You know, I understand that we need jobs. I understand that our pound note or our dollar needs to be competitive. I understand, right, that we need to, sometimes control some borders to a degree. I understand these standards of living that we've come to expect, and the price of property and etc. I understand that we have an armed forces that we need to support, and we need to make sure that we are able to defend our country, our nation, and the world against terrorism and all these kind of. I understand all of these things, but if we can't get right the fundamental things that makes our society integral and accountable, supportive and encouraging, united in truth, then what kind of person are we voting in? What is the characteristics and ingredients? That's how we end up with Trumps of this world. Because we're too busy looking for what's personally better off for us.
I would add to that, wrongful convictions do not discriminate based on race, gender, or even age.
Absolutely.
And so anyone could get it.
And it's socioeconomic, because if you have a public defender, and like you said before, they don't have the resources or they're not looking into something, there you go. That person doesn't have the defense that they would need to defend themselves, and then they come out and they still are looked at as an ex-con. Like that idea that you've been in prison. And I'm saying that just in relation to the fact that if like my brother getting shot by police, the first question is, well, what did he do to get shot? Yeah. And so that idea that people are innocent and coming out of prison or still in prison, I have a lot of respect for the work that you do, tremendously.
Well, thank you. I do you as well, because I'm one of those people that know when somebody gets shot, a lot of times they didn't have to do anything.
Right.
And so that's heartbreaking. And my heart goes out to you and your family.
Thank you. There's a lot of us out here. That's right.
Well, hey guys,
Exactly right.
we have now officially, once again, run out of time. And I'm never surprised to see just how quickly this 2 hour flies. When some people wonder, well, I can't talk for 2 hours. I think we can do another 2 hours after this and still be scratching the surface. But I just want to take this opportunity, first and foremost, to thank you, Kristine Bunch, for sharing this story and this journey with us. It's been an amazing 2 hours, let me just say. And I think everybody, our listeners, our audience, right across the world, on every social media platform that we are streaming on, will be absolutely connected to you and your passion, as you've shared with us today. As for me and Stephanie, we're just speechless, and we are just honored to have shared the stage with you today as you've shared that story. I want to thank you, Stephanie, for coming alongside and supporting. I know we didn't get to do as much as what we had promised to do with what you wanted to bring into this.
I was absolutely engaged and wanted to hear everything. I wanted to hear more.
Yeah. And this is it.
Appreciate you sharing.
I'm absolutely hooked on this now, and I want more.
Yep.
You are a remarkable human being, Kristine Bunch, and your brother Michael. Well, he's just Patrick Lane referred to him as his. He referred to you as his new Shiro. Well, Michael's my new hero. So we've got a hero and a Shiro in the family. You guys have been truly amazing. It's been an absolutely wonderful 2 hours. It's been a great time that and I really just hope that everybody that's been tuning in and listening in today are informed, educated. Their hearts have been touched. They've been met at a point that they can understand and move forward, and they are geared to going out and trying to influence those that can bring about the change that we need to see, so that we don't see what happened to Kristine Bunch happen to anyone else ever again. And that's why we do what we do here on the Round Table. That's why we do what we do here on Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio, is by sharing this platform, by offering this opportunity for people to tell their stories. We can give people a sense of belief that somebody is fighting their corner and we're influencing the change that we want to see. That means that these things become more a thing of the past, happening less and less, and we see more truth, we see more justice, we see more freedom, we see more accountability and transparency through the judicial system, and we see less people being wrongfully convicted and less innocent people suffering from police brutality. My name has been Kervin Julian. Our guests have been Kristine Bunch and Stephanie Babb. This is Issues Today, live on World Jam Global Radio. We have officially run out of time. We're out of here.
I already did my time. I paid for my crime.